Welcome to the Mutual Aid Report. The Mutual Aid Report delves into the concept of mutual aid and unpacks its historical significance and its role in local communities by spotlighting individuals who are making a real difference at the grassroots level in the city of Chicago. Let's elevate the profile of mutual aid, shed light on these community-based initiatives, and motivate others to either join or back existing ventures. Let's get right into it. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Mutual Aid Report on WLPN LP Lumpen Radio, Chicago 105.5 FM Lumpen Radio. Today we're joined by Maru Pinto, Director of Youth Programs and Communications Association at the Canna Equity Illinois Coalition, or CEIC, along with CEIC Deputy Director Peter Contos. Founded in 2019, the Canna Equity Illinois Coalition has been dedicated to providing resources and support to individuals affected by cannabis inequality across the state. But as we get into the interview, you'll get to know that they do that and much, much more. But before we dive in, I'd love to give my guests a chance to introduce themselves and share more about this incredible coalition. How are you both doing today?
Hello, Ariandi, I appreciate you. I'm having a great day, honestly. I'm so happy to be here.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Peter with the Coalition. Very excited to be here. Really grateful for the space to share some more information about our work. It's a beautiful rainy day outside, so just keeping the energy levels high and grateful to be in conversation with y'all.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I guess to get started, how did Canna Equity get started?
So the coalition, back in at really this time 6 years ago, Governor Pritzker had just been elected, and Illinois state lawmakers were basically, the writing was on the wall that they were going to legalize adult use cannabis in Illinois. And so they had town hall meetings all over the state, but there was a few specifically on the south side that were really well attended, packed wall to wall with people. Q&A would go like hours long after the meetings, and folks were demanding accountability. They were demanding real equity in the adult use program. They were demanding, repair and reinvestment from the years of disinvestment. They were demanding licenses for folks who built the legacy economy, and a whole lot more. Illinois was the first state where lawmakers actually, admitted that the war on drugs was a bad idea. They admitted the direct racist harm that it's caused, and community members really out of that moment, sought to build something that could actually affect change and make a difference. And 6 years later, here we are.
For sure. Thank you so much. How would you say since 2019, how has Canna Equity Illinois evolved since its inception?
A lot of different ways. So, we formed again at that time very, very loosely. Very much just trying to figure out how do we make a difference in that moment because there was so little time. This was like getting to like April 2019. We were having meetings on once a week in back of the yards. Lawmakers legalized at the end of May. And at that time, it was kind of a question of like, well, what do we do next? Like the lawmakers passed the law. Like, is there anything else we can do? And thankfully, we all kept coming back to the table and like demanding more from ourselves and saying, there's a lot more work to be done. And so um, we formed officially as like a 501(c)(3) and 501(c)(4) nonprofit organization since then, so that we have like a legal structure to do the work as well as we can take in, donations. And we've built a ton of different programs from community organizing, direct reentry services, policy work. And I'll pass it over to Maru to talk about just how the youth programming has grown.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I love to talk about youth programs, of course, being the director of youth programming. It really started about almost 2 years now, 2 years ago when I joined the coalition, which is, wow, time passes so fast. 2 years ago, I joined the coalition as a youth organizer along with about three other organizers. And I just so happened to stay along and continue to do youth organizing work with the coalition. And we had an opportunity to expand our youth programs to hire additional youth organizers. So that's kind of how we started to really create a concrete foundation for youth programs and initiatives at the coalition. This happened about last year, I would say April. And now we're just continuing to grow our youth programs. We're having events almost every month. We're hosting Know Your Rights trainings for young people. We're currently developing a cannabis safety program with a therapist in Elgin that we're hoping to bring into the city. So yeah, there's been so much growth and so much, I think, activation around youth programs. I definitely see like there's so much inspiration that our youth organizers have to continue to do this work specifically for our peers. So I'm really excited that we can continue to grow and we get so much support from all of the different members of the coalition, which is super cool.
Awesome. That's really cool. And yeah, I'd like to expand on that Know Your Rights workshops you guys have and host. So how exactly do those go down? Like, how do they start and how do you organize them?
I can definitely speak to the workshops that we've been hosting lately. So we usually get a lot of requests from community members or organizations or schools that come to us directly and see that there is a necessity for this education in their community, especially for their young people or for their adults or even elders. I think there's just a lot of need. So a lot of the times people reach out to us. We do reach out to some community partners. We do have community partners that we host workshops with regularly, but there all the time we're meeting new people who want this training, who think it's really, really important and vital, especially because this training in particular, the Know Your Rights that we host, is around safety and the cannabis laws here in Illinois. But I will pass it to Peter just so they can talk to you about how the workshop started at the coalition in general.
For sure. Thank you, Maru. So this was Know Your Rights was one of the first things we started back in 2019. So kind of into like the late summer, early fall, we kind of realized, in rereading the law, rereading all the, everything about it, realizing that there would be actually an increase in criminalization. Illinois was decriminalized prior to this, and once Illinois made it legal to purchase cannabis, we actually made it more restricted in terms of who can carry cannabis, how you can carry it, where you where you can smoke and stuff like that. And so we started back in 2019 making sure people understood you can't go outside onto the sidewalk and smoke outside. You can't smoke in a car. Young people, especially, like really making sure that young folks understood this very clearly because in the 6 years we've seen, young folks are the ones continuing to be targeted across mostly the South and West Side for whether it's public consumption, whether it's DUI for smoking in a car, and a whole lot of other stuff. Like, it's definitely something that we take very seriously and have for a number of years now. And the other thing I want to call out is just like we are like Maru said it, but like we are open to working with anybody to host workshops. So we've hosted workshops with, faith communities. We've hosted with youth organizations. We've gone to barbershops. We've gone to, block parties and music festivals. Everywhere that people are willing to talk about this, we will show up and talk about this. And also, it's a really good opportunity for folks to understand, the unique intersections of the war on drugs and criminalization. We're talking about how it affects your housing. We're talking about how it affects your immigration status, how it affects your schooling, and if you get arrested, what is the prison, school to prison pipeline? What does it mean to be criminalized as a youth? And so there's just so many things that you know, we need to be talking about, and we're, just really passionate about making sure that we get this information out in front of everybody. We're very passionate about meeting people where they're at, because especially with information like this, you have to be in a space that's comfortable for you to talk about this and to discuss it and think about it. And so, we always happy to talk.
For sure. If you could really quick, what's something crucial or a couple of examples that Illinois cannabis users might overlook but should be aware of?
That's a really great question. I just want to start off kind of spotlighting one of the resources that we pass out to community members, which is our stash bags. Those specifically support cannabis users or anyone really who want to securely carry their cannabis or flower with them. And that specifically helps mitigate like people who get pulled over for cannabis or, it's not packed correctly. The stash bag is a lockable bag. It has a lock on the front. It's also odor proof. And we definitely encourage everyone to have one, but encourage especially cannabis users to carry them with them to securely store their flower because they can get ticketed for that if it's not secured properly, especially if you're driving in Chicago and especially if you're driving on a highway. So that's one of the first things that we always talk to people about, especially if we're out in community and we have our table. It's one of the things we pass out to community members, and there's always been a really great response. A lot of people don't really know about their rights when it comes to driving with cannabis, so it's a conversation starter, but more importantly, it supports accessible education around cannabis laws and something that we can talk about on the spot.
Okay.
And I would also just add to that the everything Maru said, like it's an opportunity for folks to have a conversation because a lot of the times, we're not talking about safe storage. And we really emphasize whether it's cannabis, prescription medication, ammunition for a gun, anything that especially children should not be getting into. Put it in a bag. And these are very it's not very complicated. This is a program actually the state of Illinois created when we did legalize. And so it's something that really should be it's like heralded as a success story. Like this is it's keeping people safe by giving them a bag. Like who would have thought? And unfortunately that program was discontinued in the current year. And so it's definitely something that we as an organization are trying to talk about and make sure people understand how big of a difference a small program like this can make.
For sure. I guess segueing into like keeping people safe and keep talking about people's records and how can that can affect people and their education and their careers. I would like to talk about a notable service that you all provide, which is record clearing for cannabis related offenses. So how and when did you guys begin offering this service?
Yeah, so similar to the Know Your Rights, this was the other thing we immediately knew the conversations needed to be happening, which was around record clearing. Illinois did include an automatic expungement program as part of legalization, which on the surface is really cool. There's ended up being a lot of problems with it. And so we'll talk about those problems another day, but we knew, really at the end of 2019 that this was something we would want to get involved in. So we were doing lots of education at that time about how to start the record clearing process. In 2021, we received funding to actually start hosting our own in-house record clearing. Um, and we're very proud to continue to do that to this day. We had a record clearing event on Friday. And we take a lot of pride in making sure that this is like a full comprehensive process from getting the actual fingerprinting done, because that is typically the hardest part for everybody is you have to go to Chicago Police Headquarters um, during working hours during the week. That's the only way you can start this process. And that's traumatic on a lot of levels. Obviously, again, it's during working hours, so it can be difficult for folks to make that happen. But we pay for rides, pay for the fingerprinting, and then connect them directly to our attorneys, directly to our paralegals, so they can answer all the questions somebody might have. Okay, when's the court date? What has to happen before court? What letters of support do I need? All that good stuff. And so, really since 2021, we've been offering this kind of full service process and making sure, folks have everything they need so they can move on with their lives because this process is definitely designed to be as difficult as possible. And in Illinois, there's more than 1,000 laws that hold you back if you have a criminal record. And so it's really, again, a system that's designed to ensure people go back to prison and don't ever get to, live a full, healthy life in the community.
Mhm. If you could, can you speak a little bit about how considerable like these cannabis offenses can be on your record? Are they still considered a big deal in Chicago, even though that cannabis is now legalized? For those who may not know.
Yeah, that's a great question. The main thing we would really stress to everybody is no matter what is on the record, even if it's possession of a small amount of weed, to, something that might be more serious, either way, that being on your record is going to hold you back. Whether it's housing, jobs, training programs. Um, there's so many different ways that people are held back, and so we really want to stress to folks like no matter what is on your record, you should be trying your best to try and clear that. Our organization, just to be clear, we do clear cannabis records, but we clear everything possible because folks need to move forward with their lives. And if we're only clearing half the record because we're deeming it it shouldn't be eligible, that's a huge problem. And so We work incredibly hard to make sure folks understand, like, no matter what it is, let's get it cleared. Illinois has one of the most expansive record clearing laws in the country. So while it's difficult to actually do the process, there are very few things that can't actually be cleared. So again, we strive and we work really hard to make sure folks can wipe the slate clean as best as possible so they can move on. And again, whether it's jobs, housing, um, anything under the sun, you know,
Yeah.
get them moving.
Hmm. And how can someone get started with getting their record clear? How could they reach out to you if they wanted to learn more about that?
So we have folks that are always welcome to reach reach out to the coalition. We have, social media, we have email. Um, those are definitely typically the best ways to get involved with us. Um, and just, really get encourage folks to reach out directly and ask questions because folks you might just think, oh, I did this many years ago, so I must not be eligible. Or it's like, well, I have an assault charge, so I must not be eligible. That is typically not the case. Like at least at the very least, folks, we encourage everybody to reach out and at least have a conversation, whether it's with the coalition or another organization, because there's a lot of great legal aids here in the city.
Hmm. And just so people know, how long does this usually take to, like, does it depend? Like if you just have a minor offense to, like, like how long does a record clearing usually take? If that makes sense. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things when we first started this project, um, it would take, upwards of 2 years. We had a lot of there's a lot of stakeholders involved when it comes to clearing a record, the courts, which means the clerks, the police departments, the state police, the FBI. There's a lot of different organizations, and so it used to take up to 2 years. We are seeing these numbers start to drop, especially really over the last like 18 months or so. We've seen these numbers really start to fall. So hopefully it's about like a year, sometimes less, which is really exciting. One thing that is important for people to know is, especially in Cook County, the people who ultimately decide whether somebody's record can be cleared or not are judges. Judges are democratically elected in Cook County. And so it's really important that folks do understand, kind of who the judges are, because the judges rotate. That's something I've learned through this work is that, every so often, judges will rotate their shifts and some will move from, one courtroom to the expungement court, and you might have a judge who does not want people's records to be cleared. And so it's also a mixed bag of what judge is representing your case because again, some of them just really are stuck in the past and refuse to acknowledge that people can move on with their lives.
Mm. Thank you for expanding on that and like talking about all the different like variables that go into account with like record clearing. That's really helpful, and I hope somebody out there is listening and they can eventually reach out to you guys if they're looking for help. And I would like to talk about this. So in 2020, two dispensaries signed your community benefits agreement, CBA. Can you talk more about these two and what exactly that means and what exactly a CBA means too?
For sure. So, of the two companies that signed, one of those companies never actually opened their store. So it's really just the one CBA that became fully operational. And what I will be very transparent about was we had a very good kind of first year to that project. They hired a lot of folks within our networks. We were able to say, hey, people, anybody who's a coalition member or again in our community is saying, hey, if you want a job in the industry, it was a great opportunity. A lot of folks did get hired, which was great. They're hosting education programs out of the store, which was amazing. Unfortunately, that business was bought out by a much larger corporation, Acreage Holdings, and so the deal was kind of like voided because of that. And so after about a year, there just became like no autonomy. Like we couldn't talk to the managers and say, "Hey, we want to do a workshop or we want to do a program series, out of the store," and like they wouldn't be able to decide everything for themselves, which really strained the relationship. And so it was definitely something that was very exciting. And the campaign itself, we went to 30 different community meetings for, 20 plus dispensaries, and every single one being able to, rally community members, demand more from these cannabis businesses. But unfortunately, just the way that capitalism works. It's very hard to find a sustainable solution. Um, and it's tough to,
Mhm.
yeah.
Is there any plan to like bring those agreements back um, or anything like that?
That's a great question. So it's one of the reasons that the campaign has kind of taken a break was in 2020 when we first started it, that was kind of the first wave of licenses. This was like January, February 2020. And so we were in meetings, almost every other day pretty much. Because there were so many businesses that wanted to move to Chicago because obviously COVID happened, and then these lawsuits that tied up the whole cannabis program, happened for years. There just wasn't any kind of opportunities for a long time. And so now that we're at the point where, that it's the social equity licenses have all been distributed, people can actually get set up. We have been in conversations with a couple of stores recently about trying to set up a CBA. I hope that over the next month we can share more news if that's something that we do engage in. But this opportunity is definitely not going anywhere. Because the other piece to this is when it comes to like the education in the community is getting folks to understand, it can't just be cannabis. We should be seeking out CBAs for all the businesses that want to open up across our communities, especially the large scale developments, especially the big box corporate chains, who, we know the city is offering so many tax incentives to. Like, we should be holding these companies to a higher standard collectively. And, again, it starts with education. And so one thing we do celebrate, again, it might be, we don't have a lot of actual agreements to celebrate, but the education we've been able to do and get people to understand, like, you know, how do we ask for more and how do we demand more? Because a lot of these businesses, yeah, they're taking a lot from us, so we should get something in return.
For sure. Um, can you speak a little bit on your 2025 cannabis equity priorities and what exactly they are?
There's kind of two things we can say. There's like the community side, and then there's like the policy side. Would you want to hear one of those specifically?
We can talk about both.
So I'm excited to share. We have a lot of projects going on this year, of course, with youth programming, as well as with expungement, know your rights. I would definitely say that we have a couple of community spaces that we're trying to curate this year, especially for folks on the south side. We have one event that's happening in March 20th, that will be called the People's Room. And that is an initiative that we're hoping to recreate monthly. It's being led by our youth organizers, open to all community members. And it is just going to be a space to really bring together community members, which is one of our goals this year, to actively support our community members and bringing them together, along with education. So there will be a Narcan training, also hosted by another of our youth organizers, as well as mutual aid resources, which is definitely one of our priorities this year. And to speak more to just mutual aid in general, in the past year and a half, we've kind of dabbled and supported our community members who have needed like mutual aid posts or just boosting their fundraisers. But in the last about couple of months, we've realized and really seen the need for a grounded, structured mutual aid program. So that is something that we are trying to fit into all of our services, whether it's expungement, whether it's youth organizers, trying to make sure that all the community members that we reach, we are supporting them with services, but also digging in a little deeper and making sure that they are safe and they are well fed and they're okay. And if they need support boosting fundraisers, we can do that, or connecting to other resources, we can do that. So that's definitely been one of our focuses. Like, how can we create community spaces and hubs, but how can we also create resources that are, supporting more than just our membership and the wider community. So definitely we'll say that. And along with that is education, of course. So like this month, again, we have a virtual teach-in on March 21st, and that's going to be with the ACLU, because we want to talk about Know Your Rights, but this specific Know Your Rights is on how the executive orders are impacting LGBTQ plus communities. So that'll be a space for community members to ask lawyers directly, like, what's going on with my rights? What do I need to know to protect myself and my families or my friends or my children? So that's, these are kind of spaces that we want to curate that talk about education, include resources, but ultimately is for community members. Um, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of other programs that I can share, but again, our priorities around community is education, making it as accessible as possible, whether it's digital education or physical education with zines and booklets and art. We're just trying to dive really deeper so we can our youth organizers and our organizers overall are engaged with the work that we're doing, but also making sure that we can connect with community at the same time. Along with our mutual aid resources, we want to be as accessible as possible, but also be a supportive network to our community members and making sure that they know we have their back. And if it's something that we can't do or we don't have capacity to help them with, then connecting them with community resources and community partners that we do trust and know that can support them. So I definitely say those have been our top priorities that we've talked about.
And just to add to that real quick is, I think one thing that Myra mentioned that just like really want to celebrate is that we've been able to build a really wide directory of service providers, of educators, and just collaborators generally across the city. And the resource fairs that we host and the different education events that we host, we go everywhere. Anywhere there's a demand, anywhere that we have collaborators we can work with. And so I think that's one really unique thing about the work is that we will make sure that we are present in as many communities as we can be. Again, trying to meet folks where they're at so that we can make sure that they get all the services they need, all the physical resources, all the education, all the training they desire, so they can get what they need moving forward.
Thank you so much. Again, you're listening to the Mutual Aid Report, and I'm here with Canna Equity, and we'll be right back after this short break. Thank you, guys, and welcome back to the Mutual Aid Report. And we're here with Maru Pinto and Peter Cantos from Canna Equity Illinois Coalition. Welcome back, everybody. And before the break, we were talking a little bit about all of the resources you guys provide, also aside from cannabis equity and just like all the wide array of like educational resources you provide and resource fairs and also like jobs and opportunities that come with hosting a coalition like the ones you guys have. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. And I'd like to ask Maru, we talked a little bit about your youth program before, but I'd really love to learn more about it and see what you guys have been doing recently. So can you talk a little bit about a little bit more about what that is, and can you recap us a little bit?
Yes, thank you so much. So our youth programs really was founded about 2 years ago, but within the last year has really been kind of like structured and growing amazingly, not without the amazing youth organizers on our team. I would like to shout out them really quickly because they're amazing. But all of our programs that we host are from the inspiration of our organizers. So a couple of the programs that we do host would be Friends of Nature, which shout out Kayla, is a nature-based program and is going to be growing, of course, this spring and summer. But it's a program where we basically host nature walks or nature-based activities to talk about the intersections of environmental justice and cannabis education, as well as a little bit about like the war on drugs and history. These are just like an accessible event or walks that we can talk to young people about cannabis, but also like more so specifically the background of cannabis, talking about terpenes, breaking down the plant, actually getting into education, but in a really fun way. So that's one of our programs that, of course, we're going to be growing this summer to include adults and young people. But it's just like a glimpse into the kind of education that we want to host that is more engaged, of course, including nature. And other programs that we host, of course, would include Know Your Rights workshops, which I did talk a little bit about earlier. And those are hosted across the city with so many different orgs. I would say the one we just hosted recently this past week was with the UIC law students. It was really great. We hosted a Know Your Rights workshop for law students specifically, and they were asking us a whole bunch of questions, and that was just amazing for our youth organizers to, be speaking to law students and helping them understand cannabis laws in the state. And similarly, we have also worked with Trans Chicago to host a Know Your Rights workshop to talk about, cannabis and your rights with specifically trans and queer people. So really excited just about the spaces that we've been able to go to with our education. But additionally, other programs we are hosting would be like faith-based advocacy. So the People's Room event that I mentioned earlier is going to be at the Hyde Park Union Church on the South Side. It's a multi-generational interfaith event. So anybody is welcome to that space. And our organizer who leads it as is also a pastor in their own right. And they love to talk about cannabis from the lens of faith, and being able to bring in so many different community members to have that conversation. Because, in faith based spaces, it can be still very stigmatized. So, in that right, we are working to break down the stigma, to bring in the conversation in churches, because we know that people in church, there can be people who use cannabis, but more specifically, this education around cannabis safety, know your rights, it fits in any space. So that's why we are super excited to host events at churches or with faith communities, but specifically to have a youth organizer who is doing that work has been really amazing. We are also, I'm sorry, there's so many things that we do. We're also working to create, I'm going to shout out Ellison and Jeannie and John, but we're working to create basically a partnership of progressive student groups. So we want to see just like a coalition of progressive student groups to come together to host accessible education, but really to talk about our rights, of course, and the way that we want to see like students being respected on their campuses, fighting the war on drugs on campuses, and of course this goes to high school students as much as college students, because we still see a lot of students overall being criminalized for the use of cannabis. And if they are caught, a lot of students, their punishment, quote unquote, is a class or even getting their financial aid revoked, a lot of things like this. So that's something that we want to address, but we also want to talk to students directly to understand what their needs are at their schools, how their administration has been responding to, like people who have been quote unquote caught with cannabis. So that there's a lot of different activities that we're planning. There's so many more, but I'm so sorry about that. But specifically, we are trying to grow our capacity as well. So we are very open to young people who want to join the coalition as a youth organizer, who see a need in their community for a specific program. Again, whether it's a nature-based program, whether it's education, we are opening our doors to them. We're opening our doors to them, but we want to see more programs made for community members and young people, for community members and young people. So that's definitely one of our priorities overall, just making sure that the programming that we do, the activities that we create, the events that we bring to communities directly reflect the communities we're going to, and they're actually actively supporting and benefiting from what we have. So I would say those couple of things. Peter, if you'd like to add on, I know a lot of our programs as well have been just kind of growing from what the coalition has originally offered, and we're hoping to continue growing. I know we also have the legacy program, so I could pass it to Peter to talk a little bit about that. But these are all things that we're trying to expand on and hopefully continue in the next couple of months to years, so that we can continue offering really cool programs for people of all ages. Well, thank you.
Yeah, just add to everything Maru said. One of the really exciting things about having capacity to do youth programming and youth organizing is we have brought on a ton of student interns, which has been really cool just to um, yeah, offer a place for students from right now. We have DePaul, Adler. Maru mentioned we do a lot of collaborations with the UIC law. And so a lot of students from different backgrounds, public health, psychology, law, who are interested in our work, are able to, join us and do a variety of different projects, which are all really exciting. Maru mentioned earlier, like the Canna Safety program, like how can we make sure that young people are getting evidence-based harm reduction education, trying to move away from things like just say no. We have the capacity to help build stuff like that now. So it's really, really exciting to see kind of what will come. And collaborating with the Kids Mad City for the Peacekeepers program. We're hoping to do that again this year. And just again, continue to offer young people a place and a seat at the table to decide what it is they want to create. Because one thing we really stress with the coalition is like folks need to be in, you want to be comfortable with the work that you're doing, what, the community you're in, the type of work you're doing. And one thing that's been beautiful to see with the youth program is just like all of the organizers like taking that and just running with it and building out some really amazing stuff. So yeah, a lot more things. Mara mentioned some of the events happening at the end of this month, but definitely encouraging folks to just see what's out there when it comes to these programs because there's so much out there, and also encourage folks to ask questions. Like all the programs that we have came up because somebody's like, dang, we should do this service, or we should offer this kind of class. And then at some point that became an actual program. And so we always really encourage people to have these kind of conversations, like find the gaps, find what's missing, um, so we can, address that and move forward.
For sure. I would like to talk about that program you guys were talking about youth, and if you could remind me of the name, what was it? The cannabis, like you're teaching youth about cannabis and like the safety. What's it called again?
Yes, the Cannabis Safety Program.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
I would just love to hear more about that program and like why it's so important that youth just learn about canna equity and just like and yeah, about safety with that cannabis and what exactly goes on in that program. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for asking. This is one of our newest programs, I would say. It's very much in its development phases. We are currently working with Rory, who is a therapist in Elgin, who works at like remedial schools. So specifically, this program in its first iteration is talking directly to young people who have already been impacted by the justice system. So we have been focusing on like safety measures or precautions that young people can take if they are going to use cannabis. Again, kind of going off what Peter said, we are not trying to discourage or encourage use. We're just trying to encourage safety and education at the same time. So this program definitely prioritizes that. We also have a very open kind of like flow to the program. So let's kind of start at week one, right? Where we talk about what is harm reduction, what is cannabis safety, what are these things? We want to make sure that students understand the very basics of these topics so that we can get into like bigger things around the laws. So we can talk about a little bit about cannabis history and the impact of the war on drugs, starting to create a space for these conversations so that students who may be interested can start to learn more. But overall, the program, the aim is to just create safer environments, making sure that students take with them how to use harm reduction strategies in their everyday lives when using cannabis or just in general. Because again, a lot of these skills are transferable if they have an anxiety attack or if they are feeling extreme emotions. We also talk about that in the program as well, and how again like you may or not use cannabis and you may or may not have a good time. So what can you do to mitigate the risks? Um, Again, a lot of the young people in this specific iteration of the program, since they already have had interactions with police or with the justice system, we have also incorporated art activities and reflection activities to talk to or get the young people to really talk about their own stories, and to understand their own feelings around cannabis, their own feelings around their own experiences, because that's just as important as the education aspect. Really getting them to reflect and feel safe in the space to truly talk about these experiences, to process them, but to also, again, think about safety plans for the future, what they can do to be safer if they use cannabis, or to find other ways to deal with stress or anxiety which is often reasons why young people use cannabis in the first place, is what we've also seen just in this program and overall, that a lot of young people who have talked to us and given us their testimony and their stories share that they use cannabis because of their mental health, because of trauma, because of growing up in Chicago and stress and PTSD. So, we, of course, we don't encourage or discourage, but we do want to create spaces where young people can share their story and not feel ashamed or not feel re-stigmatized or recriminalized. And that's really the goal of this space. We also want to bring the workshops that are happening in Elgin right now. The goal is to bring them to Chicago and ultimately really asking our city council, our Chicago public schools to start to integrate more holistic education, especially when we're talking about, again, punishments around cannabis. We can be answering with holistic education and restorative justice practices instead of punitive punishments that a lot of schools resort to. So this is kind of like the vision for this program. We want to make sure that students are feeling seen, that they can tell their story, that they're taking education with them, starting to understand why people are criminalized for cannabis and plants in the first place. But ultimately, we want to expand this to make sure that every student has this kind of resource for them.
Mm-hmm.
And just to build on to what Maru said, it was all amazing. One of the really unique perspectives we have as a group is like we're a multi-generational group of people. So while we have, youth programs, we have programs that are targeted towards adults, targeted programs targeted to parents. We have, our staff is ages 20 to 67. And so being able to have a wide variety of voices, a wide variety of perspectives. And one thing we all share, because we do come from different backgrounds, have different lived experiences, but we all have, all of us have been failed collectively by the lack of education, the lack of opportunities to have direct, honest conversations about feelings and about our autonomy. And so it's really, just a really great opportunity and a huge privilege to us as a coalition to be able to, try and build this out and build this into something that can be implemented universally across the board, whether it's schools, whether it's faith communities, whether it's nonprofit and different youth organizations. Like, we got to have these spaces, especially for young people today. Like things get, have not gotten better for a lot of young people's lives, and like it's again honest conversations that just have to be had, and people deserve an opportunity to be heard, and we're grateful to be able to have these spaces.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it's really awesome to hear that um, you guys are providing a space for youth to be educated and, of course, just feel safe in an environment and surrounded by people who are going through the same thing as them. That's very awesome to hear, and of course, like, that's what we want for youth all around the city or around the state or around the world, right? Just provide youth with a space where they can just talk about their experiences and not feel any sort of stigma about what they're going through. So it's really awesome to hear about that. I would just love to hear more about like what other mutual aid efforts that you guys provide, and of course I also know that you guys host a lot of resource fairs. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they started pretty recently, and I would love to hear more about that. And how did they get started, and what exactly you guys provide at the resource fairs?
Okay, I was just gonna say I can talk about like mutual aid specifically, and then I'll definitely pass it to Peter to share more about our resource fairs and how those started. But for mutual aid, like I said earlier, we are hoping, not hoping, we are actively doing. We're creating a really structured foundation for mutual aid in our organization. We want to ensure that our members, our team, we all have what we need. And this is especially important right now as we're seeing how much violence is coming from executive orders, defunding of community organizations and pantries and spaces that are really like hubs of safety. And right now, we are actively growing our programs to include a pop up closet or like mobile clothing access, all being led by our amazing organizer, Pigeon. Shout out to them as well. But yeah, we are actively growing this program. We want to ensure that everybody who needs clothes or accessories, who if they have a interview, we can get them clothing accessibly. We are working to have like again like a mobile program where one of our organizers can just take clothing from the closet that we have and directly deliver it to community members. So that's really like the goal there. But additionally, we host pop-up closets for community members around the city. So that's with spaces like one of our last ones was at a barber shop, actually, like a haircut salon, which was awesome. But we've also hosted them with Trans Chicago. The resource fair that we're hosting in March, we'll be hosting uh, a pop-up closet as well. And we just see that like that need as very, very valuable, or that resource very, very valuable for our community members. They're always a lot of people are always asking us like, I need support with funds for clothing for this. I need support getting access to clothing for interviews or resources for this. So that's why we want to, as much as possible, have these services available. And mobily is amazing because there's a lot of our community members who don't have access to transportation, who can't drive and pick up these resources. So that's a really important aspect of our mutual aid, that when we can, we want to get to our community members to get these resources to them. Additionally, we just dropped a mutual aid form on our socials, so that'll help us really reach community members who need our support directly. And with that, of course, is the pop-up free closets or the mobile closet access. But also we have book giveaways. So if you want to access free books, you can, or books for community members, you can. But as well as, I want to say, if you need to link to resources or you need mental health resources or financial resources, like Peter said earlier, we have a wealth of community partners. So we also talk to community members who just need a connect, who just need a referral, and that can change someone's life because there's, I guess, not a lot of trustworthy places that some of our community members can go to make sure that they get the support that they need. Um, I mean, there's a lot of times where you go to community service and it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to even be heard. And that's kind of what we don't want to see, or we don't want to recreate. We want to create mutual aid support that can be like on demand, or, as soon as they reach out to us, we can support them, and that includes with like mutual aid posts as well. And on our social medias, we have been posting posts for community members or boosting fundraisers. But that's definitely one of the needs that people have as well, like just a design to raise money to boost their needs. Even that can be a barrier sometimes. So we do provide like free designs if you just need to raise funds or anything like that. Um, yeah, there's a couple of things that we're working on, but I would say definitely the pop-up closets, the resource referrals, the mutual aid posts, and of course our resource fairs, all available to community members, and we're actively growing as well.
And I can quickly just comment, everything that Maru said. This is something that, yeah, we've been hosting for years now, and it really kind of came off of the back of, we started doing the record clearing education back in 2019, and it was at those events where folks are saying, well, what about housing? Well, what about a job? Well, what about an ID? Um, and it just became very clear that again, it's not just, folks, there's a variety of different things. We all have a million different needs in order for us to be safe and sustainable. And society is not helping people meet those needs. And so it's unfortunately, we had to begin to organize things so we can again localize as many resources in one place as possible. It also helps with promotion when you have, again, all these organizations that are from a neighborhood doing, knocking doors, doing canvassing, flyering the bus shelters, making sure people know like, hey, this is event is happening next Thursday, from 10 to 2, you need to be there and have a list of the resources and services available. Yeah, something literally since 2019, we've been having these conversations and again just trying to make sure um, we make ourselves accessible because that's one thing as well. We started in 2019, and everything we've never had a formal like home base or office, and so that's another piece to this is while we would love to have a formal office and home base. we are allowed to be flexible. We're allowed to, again, empower our organizers to host programs in their neighborhoods where they already have these relationships and connections. And so that is one of the benefits of being kind of so decentralized is, we prioritize partnerships where we are in the city.
Thank you. Yeah, talking about like having an office, or I guess I would like to ask, what type of mutual aid efforts or what are your dreams for Canna Equity of Illinois? I would love to hear what plans you have for the future.
So many. There's so many different things we want to do. Obviously, I think every program area, we want to be able to have all of our staff be, full time, have benefits, really make this a much bigger, more formal organization. That's definitely important. We definitely dream of having an office space, like again, one place like ideally on like a commercial block where folks can just walk by us and interact with us, engage with us. Um, just giving ourselves that like actual like home base. Um, so there's so much to share. I personally, one thing that I will have to mention is we do a lot of work in Springfield. I do a lot of policy work in Springfield, and so personally would love to finally be able to celebrate passing some bills because it is very difficult to work on so many of the issues we're working on. Um, whether it's cannabis equity, whether it's criminal justice reform, um, everything under the sun that we work on, it's not easy. And so it would be love to be able to celebrate some wins this spring. But Mara, I'm sure you have a lot more specific goals.
Thank you. We'll definitely say having a space would be amazing. I think that'd just be great to have a little hub for our organizers to be able to go to. But honestly, just cementing some of our youth programs would be amazing. Some of the ones I mentioned, just to continue to grow those and cement those, and making sure that we can, pay our youth organizers to lead those programs. It's really like my goal. And I've been really, really grateful and excited to see that we've been able. I think we have about like 6 people on our team, and they're all young people. So that makes a big difference when you're able to hire young people to host events and programming for other young people. It's just really amazing. So hopefully we can continue to do that, and expand the amount of youth that we employ, the amount of young people that we're in community with, and are creating programs for. That's definitely one of my goals for sure.
For sure. Thank you so much. I guess since we were talking about mutual aid earlier, is there any mutual aid efforts that you guys would like to try out, or something that you would just like to provide to the community that you don't already provide?
I definitely would like to see um, more programming, like I guess like more programming for our legal side. So expanding our legal services would be amazing because we have a lot of people that come to us who need a lawyer, just like questions for a lawyer, and they don't necessarily need like their record clear. They just kind of need some support with anything that they're trying to address. So that would be awesome to just hire some legal support who can be present like at our resource fairs to just ask questions, but also like caseworkers, people who can, who are hired and directly know how to talk to community members who are going through different things, whether it's trauma, whether it's unstable housing, wanting to hire caseworkers and counselors who can directly support our community members. I think that's definitely a big goal.
Thank you. I would also like to ask Peter, do you have any mutual aid efforts that you would like to pursue with Canna Equity?
I think beyond everything that Mari's spoken on, like I really want to emphasize like how important it is that we include education with mutual aid. Like beyond just making sure that we can address legal needs, physical needs, get like all these social services, all these things, making sure people understand the why behind the situation. Like why is it so difficult to get a record cleared? Why is it so difficult to get an ID? Why is it so difficult to just fully reintegrate after you've been home from prison? And just continuing to get folks to understand the larger systemic, the ways the state utilizes their power to ultimately make people's lives miserable, and to keep people trapped. And so like really making sure folks don't just see it as like it's not just a food drive. It's much more than this. And like we really take a lot of pride in making sure that this is a much more comprehensive and sustainable.
Thank you guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Mutual Aid Report. And thank you to my wonderful guests, Maru Pinto and Peter Cantos from Canna Equity. It was great having you guys here, and I hope everybody listening was able to learn a little bit about what you guys do and is going to get motivated to help, like support you in whatever way you can, and of course volunteer at your events. And I would love to put in your information here. If for more information on Canna Equity, you can visit them at cannabisequityillinois.org. That is CANNABISEQUITYIL.org. And they can also be found on social media at Canna Equity Illinois. That is CANNAEQUITYIL. And of course, for any resources on record clearing or record expungement, you can email them at CEIC expungement, CEIC expungement, EXPUNGEMENT Thank you so much, guys, and I really, really appreciate you guys joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. It was great.
Thank you again so much for sharing your space with us.